And hello, folks. Once again, it is Friday, and once again, we go into the breach. Um, so, tonight, you may have missed us last week. Sorry we had to do that. We went ahead and rescheduled that show. We didn't cancel it on coding, but we rescheduled it. Um, and then starting tonight, we have a 2 week series that we're doing. Well, actually, a 3 week series that we were doing on the U.S. Forest Service and a couple of the different branches inside the United States Forest Service. And tonight's, I think, is going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be eye-opening for a lot of people, especially a lot of us who live up in like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Montana, those states that are bordering Canada right now, because we are getting, well, we have had all summer the effects of their wildfire smoke. What do you think about that, Adrian?
Yeah, it seems like when I was young, I don't remember it as much, and maybe I wasn't paying as attention. But now, when we go home to visit Idaho, or we're here, we live here. This is home, but where I grew up, they have had many summers of just smoke, intense smoke from forest fires from Canada. So definitely seems to me like it's an every year thing for multiple states.
Right. It just seems to me like it's been worse this year than it has before. So tonight, not only are we talking about this subject, but we are actually bringing on a special guest who not only was a Forest Service wildland firefighter, but he was also on a helitack crew, and he was also a park ranger. And once again, we're going to bring on Doc Z. Doc Z, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. We were just talking about the smoke that we've been getting from Canada's wildfires, and kind of how that's been affecting people with not only just normal people, but also people who have breathing problems. We were talking about how I think it's been the worst this year than it has been for a few years, as at least I can remember.
Yeah. The biggest problem they have up there is it's so vast. There are many places, there just aren't roads there. And so if a fire gets started, there's no way for them to fight it except by dropping slurry from an airplane or helicopter. But like I say, it's just vast quantities of territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we wanted to bring you on tonight, and we wanted to talk about, I thought this would be an interesting topic, is to talk about wildland firefighting. Not a lot of people know about it. Some smaller departments might have a wildland side of things, but for, at least from what I've seen, you only really hear it maybe once or twice a summer in the news. So I thought it'd be interesting to bring you on and just have you inform the listeners and the viewers. What exactly is the role of the wildland firefighters and the helitack crews within the U.S. Forest Service?
And CR and Doc Z, if we could just pause before that, because so I wanted to mention one of Doc Z's, well, we call him Doc Z because that's how most listeners know him, from his broadcast that we did based upon his naval service on the USS Nimitz. And the Marines had nicknamed him Doc Z because he was their corpsman, one of their corpsmen. And so that's how most people know him. So we kept with that moniker. But I used to call him Mr. Wilderness because we've been married now for 41 years. And when I met him, he did scuba diving. He was a firefighter. He just had all of these adventures. And so it really opened like a new world for me. One of the things I I do want to say, as we introduce him, is that he is a great lover of nature and of trees. And when I met him, it was I think right after his stint in the Idaho University of Idaho greenhouse. So he worked there for a while, and one of our favorite trees we have on our property is now, what is it, 43-year-old Douglas fir. Yeah, and it came from the University of Idaho. And when Dan gave it to his parents, and it was many years after we moved to Minnesota, and they were leaving their house, and so they gave it to us, and we uprooted it and replanted it in our backyard, and it's done beautifully well. But it's so nice to be able to look out there and see that Doug fir. Yeah, but I've learned a lot.
It was 6 inches tall when I got it from the greenhouse, and it was 4 feet tall when we transplanted it from Mom and Dad's house to here.
Yeah, now it has to be, what, 40 feet
probably
tall?
Good 45 feet tall now.
Yeah.
Right.
Time goes by fast, CR. So when people think about Idaho, the other thing that we probably want to mention is there's the Panhandle. That is not where Doc Z was firefighting. That's where I lived with my parents in Coeur d'Alene area. There's Sandpoint up there. Built a lot of beautiful lake communities. And then the firefighting, and we went to school in Moscow, Idaho, which is around here too, in the Palouse. And the firefighting here, Doc was in Chehalis National Forest. Is that correct? Towards southern Idaho.
Chalice.
I always want to say Chehalis because my sister lived in Chehalis, Washington, and I always want to say that wrong, but Chalice National Forest.
Right. And that's so Chalice National Forest is southern central Idaho.
Yes.
It's huge. Right here. Okay, so lots of wilderness.
Yeah, you got the river runs through it.
So thanks, Doc Z, for letting us talk a little bit more about that, and welcome.
Yeah. So what got you into the U.S. Forest Service?
Well, my cousin Tom and I from Minnesota here. I did after graduating high school, I went to North Dakota State for a year, and my cousin Tom went to University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, and he said, well, you're doing geology, you should come out here. And so I thought about it, and I went out there to meet him, and then we ended up getting a little place there at the top of 6th Street Hill. And after school was out, he said, well, last year I went down to Chalice Ranger District and worked in the summers down there. He goes, we should see if you could do that too. So we checked into it, and they said, yeah. So we took his old Jeep FC truck, and we bombed on down there to the Forest Service base and got all checked in, and that started the whole thing. So every summer from then on, for the next 3 summers basically, after we got out of school, we'd head on down and go work down there and live down there.
Interesting. So once you join the fire service or the Forest Service, is it kind of like the Navy where you can kind of say, hey, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to work in this side of it? Or do they just, put you where they need you?
Oh, they ask you if you've got specialties or strengths or something like that. They obviously want to use that. They want to use people who are trainable. So yeah, it worked out well.
I mean, and there's certainly, this was back in the early 80s, and there's certainly something to be said for being, I guess, young and full of energy, and to be able to keep up with that type of job as well. It's a pretty strenuous, laborious job when you go in and you're working there in the wilderness without any roads. And can you tell us a little bit about how you were transported into areas? Because as I said, there were no roads into some of those areas.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of roads. There's a lot of backcountry roads that can get you pretty close to a fire, without having to be, helicoptered in, or, we don't do a smoke jumping stuff like they do in Montana. But we would get a call, and we'd figure out whether it was just easier to drive there, or what. For us, we hadn't had any helitack training or any of that yet the first season that I was down there. So we just pile into a great big old deuce and a half and get all our gear, and they just drive up until we're close, and then we'd all jump out and head up towards the fire and start putting it out. The fire's burning up, so we start at the bottom and kind of follow them up. They would have tankers fly over and drop it at the top and kind of like keep it from spreading, and then we just come in the back and mop it up, cut it down, and dig a line, hold that line with dirt, and keep moving.
So you were mentioning, and I kind of wanted to segue into, I know the difference, but talking about the different types of crews and the different types of mobility that the Forest Service has. And you were mentioning either, driving into a point and then walking in. Now that would be like a type 2 hand crew, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, and you could get lots of people to show up in a hurry that way. And you can move fast, really. Well, once you find the boundary of the fire, and you can get in there and start knocking it down, and cut a line in to where it can't jump across the line. Then you can move, and then you don't have to worry about that fire coming around behind you. There's just a lot of things that a person can do, without a whole lot of training.
Right.
And you see right away how effective it is. And you're, oh, that's cool. Just scrape, a couple of feet of foliage off the ground until it's bare ground, and fire can't jump over that unless it's really blowing hard.
So what were the tools you put in that year? I'm sorry, CR, but when you were dropped off, when there were roads and areas into there, what were the tools that you and your team members had?
Well, we had a Sawyer, one or two Sawyers, so they had the chainsaw. And then we all pretty much had Pulaski tools. And then there was another tool, I forget the name of it, but it had kind of a wide chopping, scraping side, and on the flipped it over the other side, it had like tines on it. And that was very useful for doing lots of different kinds of things. But you could scrape a lot of surface vegetation, dried vegetation, sticks, pine cones, stuff like that, pine needles. Scrape, a good 2 foot, 3 foot section of that away down to dirt, and then we always said hold that line with dirt, because the fire would come up to that line, and unless it was really windy, it wouldn't jump across. You could move forward and feel comfortable that that line is going to stay that way, and it's not going to come around and bite you in the butt.
So you kept mentioning a Pulaski there. Can you, and for the people who don't know what a Pulaski is, can you describe what it is?
Sure. A Pulaski tool is a device that has like an axe handle, and then on one end it has an axe, and on the other end it has a sort of a cutting hoe, so you could dig it in and pull back, You can dig holes with it. You can dig lines with it. And then you flip it over. You know, if there's a root or something you need to chop through, you chop through with the axe portion of it, and then just flip it over and start digging more dirt out of it.
And so was that as far as maintaining that tool, did you put an edge on that, or is that more of a grubbing axe?
Yeah, we didn't worry about edge unless we were going to do a lot of chopping. Then we'd sharpen the axe portion a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So it was more of something to get, like,
you know, there's rocks and all kinds of stuff.
A root or a rock or something out.
Oh, you chop through a root. You got to chop through the roots because you can get a fire going in a root that will jump a fire line if you don't cut it.
Mm-hmm. Now, in that portion of Idaho, was it very often that you saw fire dozers out there, or was that more of an California thing?
You know, because it's so steep and rugged, unless it was, you know, in down lower towards the river where things flattened out, we didn't really use those too much.
I suppose accessibility.
Yeah. I mean, if they could get one up a road and it was feasible for them to use that flat enough. But I mean, we're talking really steep mountains.
Mm-hmm. And so I think maybe then it was your second season where you did the hell attack. Is that right?
Yeah, second season then, you know, went back to school after the first season, and then the second season we came down, and they sent us up to Chalice to get hell attack training because there was a need for hell attack training. So we got a lot of lightning fires way up in the mountains that there are no roads. You can't get there. And so we got training on that. We flew in a lot of different kinds of helicopters. They taught us all about the helicopters, how to wave them in, how to guide them, how to, you know, load them up and send them out. We also did sling loading from beneath. They'd come in and they'd hover, and you had a big parcel that was all wrapped up in a net, and you had a big hook, and you kind of smacked the thing. That if there's helicopters in a dry location, will create a lot of static. They'll build up static, and if you're just standing there and you go to hook the thing, hang on to it, you can get a pretty big shock. So you would smack it first real quick, and it would get rid of the built up static electricity. Then you hit the hook on it, and you give it a good tug, and then you back up and put your arms up, and then they would just take it off, and off it would go. They could drop a lot of firefighting gear up into a remote area that way, including what they call them piss pumps. It's either a bag that you wear on your back, and it has like a little trombone spray kind of a thing, or they would have a metal one with bigger metal one with that same kind of a trombone spray kind of a thing.
So you were holding lines by your digging. Was that the same on hell attack?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So you'd get there, and they would fly you in to the nearest spot. Well, first they'd fly over it and around it, so you get a view of the territory, where the fire is, where it's going, where it came from, what your escape routes would be, and where the nearest road is. Because after you're all done, they can't come get you. So you have to hike out to the nearest road and give them a call. Yeah, basically they'd fly you in, and then they'd teeter on a little ridge somewhere. When you get all your gear out, throw it down the hill, and then go sliding down the hill after it, and then make your way to the fire. And then you just start, you know, hit the ring of the fire and start working your way around it.
So it's not like they have a landing zone or a helipad and you comfortably.
No, these are like small little lightning fires. It's a tree. Tree starts on fire. Tree falls over. Starts more things on fire. And then the people who are up in the fire watch towers, they they spot this right away because their job. As soon as they see any kind of a smoke, they get on there, they figure out where it is, how far away it is, they call it in, and then boom, everybody just descends on.
So Helitack crew is almost akin to a combat team flying in and doing combat offload.
Yeah, except nobody's shooting at you. Trees could fall on you.
Good thing, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the picture that we're looking on the screen now, most people will right away identify that as the most, when they think helicopter in the military, that's the number one helicopter that'll pop up. That is a UH-1 Bell Iroquois.
Yeah. Or Huey.
So that, so you did a lot of flying in that. Was that the main airframe that you guys used?
Actually, no. When we were moving a lot of people back and forth, we would use those. Normally, they just use a Jet Ranger or a Long Ranger.
Okay.
Which is just an extended version of a Jet Ranger. So it would seat about 4 to 6 of us, plus our gear in the back area, accessible from outside.
Right.
And we had backpacks and all of that. We had food for 2-3 days. We had to go, and we brought a certain amount of water with us. But then, once we got down there and got the fire kind of under control, somebody would run to the nearest stream and go get some water. There's usually streams everywhere.
One thing CR mentioned was these were combat mission helicopters. So were some of your pilots, had they previously been in combat?
When we got on the big fires, when there were a lot of helicopters coming in, yeah, that first summer when we were doing the Squaw Creek fire, there were a lot of helicopters, all different kinds. And when those guys get together, because they come from all over the country, they're all, Vietnam chopper pilots, and they have a hoot. And they come in and they do all this. It's amazing watching those guys fly. I mean, they're just precise. And they can whip in and they whip around, set down, get their stuff done, and then up and out they go. And yeah, that was fun.
And their big bonus is they're not being shot at, right?
Right.
Indeed. Yes. And it's a big reunion for them because in the evening when they land those birds and park them, yeah, it's just a great big old family reunion.
Right. You mentioned your fire packs and everybody having, a couple days worth of food. Can you talk about what type of rations you would usually take in? Because I suppose it would be space saving.
Right. We had Korea era K-Rats, and they were pretty good. So it was all in little cans. And a couple of pouches, but mostly cans. And surprisingly, from the Korean War era, was pretty good. Definitely. Yeah, I would have no problem eating those still today. It's all in cans, and you got your little opener. You'd open your cans up and heat them up over the fire or whatever, and a lot. It came in a little, about a 6-inch wide by 6-inch tall by about 4-inch thick box, and you'd open it up and everything was in there, everything that you needed except for water.
Yep. I've had some repop K-Rats that have been redone, and yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, they're basic, but they've got enough calories to get you through. It's not like a 24-hour meal. It was just usually, they came in
you're
a
hungry,
breakfast,
you need
supper,
to eat now
dinner.
and get back to the work. Yeah.
Yep. And so with those,
Scrambled eggs and ham was my favorite.
I had that too, and those were good. But my question is, up until I think it was like 1975, the military rations had cigarettes in them. So would you guys just like toss them out or barter with them or?
Some guys smoke, some don't. We just, hey, give me your chiclets and I'll give you these cigarettes.
Right.
Chiclets are good.
They are. So as far as the hell attack, did you have a primary job while you were on the crew?
I was just a crew member, just a warm body.
Okay, so
Holding that line with dirt.
So they didn't have, like, aside from the sawyer or like the crew boss, they really didn't have specific spots in the crew.
You're just a team. We all work as a team. Everybody does what they can do to help everybody else.
So that picture right there, that's got to be, to me, like they would say in a Navy recruitment is, join the Navy, see the world. Well, what I see right there is, you can join the Forest Service and see a lot of country. But then again, I mean, right there, it looks like they're not pressed for any, humping in or going to take care of a fire. Were there times where you just got to take it in?
Usually, during, lightning season, it's dry in the summer. So when we lived out the second year, we did our hell attack training, and then we went out to a different place where they actually had a Cape Horn Guard Station was the name of it. It was out in this big meadow, and then there's mountains all around it, and we had a heliport pad and big barracks there. So we could theoretically, a lot of guys could bus into that location, and then choppers could take them and go.
Okay.
What was your question?
Oh, well, I was just talking about, it looks like, like I was saying, join the Navy, see the world. It looks like that would be a great job for somebody, like in college.
See the mountains.
Yep. Exactly. A great summer job for a college student or somebody looking for extra money at the time.
Yeah. You only got the Salmon River running right down there. And, when everything's all caught up and everything's done, you get a little R&R, you go grab an inner tube and go float down the Salmon River or go fishing.
Right.
Or go hiking up to a lookout tower.
So you were telling me a story earlier about a hike that you guys had made up to a disused fire lookout. You want to go ahead and tell the guests about that?
Yeah, that was towards the end of my first year there, after we got done with the Squaw Creek fire and all of that. About 5 of us decided that we'd heard that there's an old disused lookout tower. And that wasn't a tower. It was a big square building, probably 12 by 12, with windows and shutters all around it, and a deck that ran around the outside. Mm-hmm. Mountain ones are kind of like that. So you got a 360 view. But this one, the forest had kind of grown up around 2/3 of it. And then it was really old, kind of falling apart. They decided they weren't going to be using it anymore. So they were going to actually burn it the next year. So the 5 of us decided that we got this time off. There's nothing going on. So we caught you just start, grab your gear, your backpack and all that. You just start hiking along the road and you get your thumb out, some guy in a truck pulls over, you all pile in, and then you kind of tap on the window. Yeah, we're out here. So they drop you off. So we hiked across this big field and then up the side of this mountain. So we could see it up there. And from a ways you could see it, but then the closer you get, you can't. But then where you got to kind of wind your way up. And we finally got up there, and it was, around late supper time. The sun was starting to get a little bit lower, and it was cooling off. It can get pretty hot up in those mountains during the day. And we finally found the thing just about sundown. And the door was open. You could just open the door and walk in. It wasn't locked up or anything like that. But it was about 12 by 12, pretty nice. It had a place to lay down and sleep. We had our sleeping bags all laid up. And then around one side, the back side, and the other side was a shelf on there. And these shelves were full of, well, there was, foodstuffs and just some regular gear and a lot of hunting ammunition, piles and piles of hunting ammunition. So the locals had used this as like a little hunting lodge for years, apparently. But there was some really big ammunition in there. I mean, huge stuff. And so that got us thinking, like, well, what the heck could be up here that you need something that big for? So we settled in for the night and, closed and locked the doors, and it was quiet. We didn't hear anything. Slept like a rock. Next morning, got up.
Are we talking like 700 Nitro Express or how big of ammunition?
Stuff you'd find over like in Africa.
Okay. So yeah, 700 Nitro Express. Wow. That's I mean, that's like the size of your thumb.
Well, what big game would take that? Because you wouldn't want to use that.
I mean, normally you got your 30-06 and a lot of guys, brush guns, 30-30,
308.
308. That's all pretty common stuff. This was much, much bigger, like a 450 or 490, big stuff. So anyways, the next morning we woke up and it was a beautiful morning and we looked around and we're like, well, we really don't want to scramble down that rocky thing, because we looked out the back of the little thing and there's a beautiful little hill that goes down behind and it's all wooded. And the cool thing was the deer had eaten the undergrowth of these trees off to a perfect 6-foot height. So everywhere you looked, it was 6 feet high. It was beautiful, grassy. All the bottom of this whole area was just grass. It was about 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, nice and cool and soft. So we've got our hiking on. We're going down and we're going down. You can't see all the way to the bottom because it's 6 feet high, and the hill goes down and then goes up the other side. There's like you're going from like one ridge down a hill and then back up to another ridge on the other side. And we looked at a map. We're just going to go down, hit that little valley at the part, and then go left and then hike back out to the road. Right. And we're hiking down and it's, we're kind of tired and it's quiet. And then we see something moving up the bottom, coming from up the hill into that little valley area down there. And it was big, it was brown, and we only saw 2 legs. And it stopped and it turned and it looked our way, and then it turned and then it went up the hill on the other side. And we couldn't see it because, it's 6 feet high and it's going down the hill. Well, we just saw 2 hairy legs and it turned and went up. So Boston, one of the guys that had gone to school with us, Boston and I grabbed our knives, dropped our packs, and ran as fast as we could down there because we're like, no way, is this Bigfoot? And we get, about 20 feet from there, and then we suddenly stop. And we're like, realizing how big this thing really was. And we're like, could it have been a moose? Maybe it was a moose. And we're looking, there's only 2 trails coming up, and it turns a corner, and 2 trails going up. So could have been the big end of a moose, or it could have been Mr. Bigfoot. Never know. Anyways, it was an interesting morning. And then we went down that little thing, went out across the plateau there, and then across the river, and then caught a ride back to 318, which was our home for the summer. And it was interesting. It was fun. It was a good story.
So when you raced down the hill after that, did you see any tracks, or did you smell anything kind of off or weird?
Didn't smell anything, but you could see, because the grass was wet. It's tall and wet, so you could see the two tracks coming up side by side. You could see that still in the grass, and then turned and then up the hill, in front of us, and you could see those tracks. But then when we got to that point and we're like, he might not have gone very far. Maybe we should just get out of here. Go ahead downhill and get out of that.
We've talked about that
across the
before
river.
too, like that whole thing. So for the 43 years I've known you, that story's never changed. And the thing is, like, if your adrenaline is running, you're either gonna take off running, and you guys just didn't think and took off running toward it. So it was probably a good thing that it wasn't coming your way.
Yeah.
But I was always a skeptic until I saw about Bigfoot, until I saw the National Geographic remake of the Patterson film, and they did all the biomechanic measurements, and they showed how the it couldn't have been a suit, because a suit at the time the Patterson film was made, like, it was like the Hollywood, the most advanced costumes were Planet of the Apes with the real plastic, non-moving face. And when you look at the Patterson, you can see the musculature under the fur. They talked about how a human could not have walked that way. And metatarsal break. What was Muldrum from University of Idaho, but Idaho, one of the universities in Idaho. He's done a lot of research and work on that. So
primatologist,
So I used to think, no way, I was totally skeptical, and now I'm like, yeah, I think they probably do exist.
So, I mean, as being out in nature, because that's your job, is to be out there, either being a park ranger or, being a wildland fire, you probably saw a lot of, different things that people didn't usually get a chance to see. And the funny kind of one thing that I thought was interesting was, so my wife and I have lived here in Farmington for probably going on close to 6 years now. And I remember when she and I moved in the area, I was thinking of joining the Farmington Fire Department because they have a wildland crew. And Doc C and I went down to one of the informational meetings. And I thought it was funny because they were like, I told them what I was doing and what I was thinking about, because they have a wildland crew I wanted to get on. And I said, oh, but my dad was a wildland firefighter for the Forest Service. And the captain looked at him and he goes, so any crazy stories? And you told them about a cabin you guys were tasked with saving, right?
Oh, well, by the time we got there, we were in our pickle truck at the time, because there was a road to get there. But it was a cabin with a big stone fireplace on the other end. And it took us a while to get there. But when we got there, the tanker truck showed up just right after we got there. We made a quick ring around, made sure it wasn't going to spread anywhere. Basically, the whole log cabin had burned and fallen in. So it wasn't really going to escape anywhere. But there was still a structural problem with that huge stone fireplace on the end. We had to make sure that didn't fall down and hurt anybody, because it was a good 40-foot tall structure, just made out of rocks, and the clay pipe in the middle. So we set up a pump, and then we had a wagon truck, a tanker truck there to supply us, and we just got the big hose on that thing and from the outside and started pushing it toward the inner side. And then finally, the whole thing just went over into the pit where the house had been. So sad for the people who lost it. It was absolutely a beautiful building,
right?
But it didn't spread any farther than that, and no one was hurt.
So that and that brings to mind urban interface. You hear that a lot. I follow a guy on YouTube, Wrangler Star. He lives out in the Pacific Northwest. He was a USFS wildland firefighter, and he always talks about urban interface. Can you touch on that for a little bit?
I'm not familiar with that term too much.
So urban interface is basically what he said is basically so forests didn't grow around us. We moved into a forest.
Oh,
So
yeah.
nine times out of 10, what happens is someone will go out and they will build, they'll maybe clear a spot inside the tree for a couple of buildings. But usually their buildings are within maybe 5-10 feet of a tree. And what he was talking about and what they teach now is you want to have a clear buffer around your buildings in your area where you're going to live. So
Yes.
no fire can jump to, or, if a tree falls down, you want to have enough space to where a tree falls, it's not going to fall near your building.
Yeah. One of the things that we did, while we were on hell attack, when we didn't have calls, we did TSI, timber stand improvement. And what that does is we spent all day going out, cleaning out underneath these big stands of big old growth pines. We'd limb the pines up to about 8 feet, and then we'd get rid of all of the brush and debris and old branches and sticks and whatnot. Clean that all out, get it into a big open area where we could have a fire and burn it off. So that way, if there is a fire, the fire stays on the ground, goes right on through, it doesn't get up into the canopy where it can take off.
And I think I sent you a picture, Adrian. It was a picture of a forest crowning out, and basically, I think
Is this one?
No, it's that's getting there.
It's not quite a crown out. Yeah,
right. And what I say with crown out is when the fire is going from top of the tree to top of the tree, and it's
like
jumping.
The canopy. Yeah.
Yep. And that's scary because that's where you're starting to lose control of it.
Yeah, and that's where people die pretty easily. I mean, if and that you don't have time in that kind of situation.
Right.
So fire makes its own weather because of the heat and the updrafts. And especially if you have topography, fire will always burn up because as heat rises, it brings warm air up behind it. And you'll get it once it gets up into the canopy, like these guys over here, and you get a good wind coming up, and that'll just jump from tree to tree to tree, and it'll just keep going. And that's really hard to fight.
Yeah, we really have to pause and, say thank you to the wildland firefighters and firefighters in general who risk their lives. It's to me, I can't imagine just being in the situation where you're starting to get this type of situation where it's going to the top parts of the trees. They're relatively close there. What was your training in terms of safety, and what recourse did you have if something got out of hand?
Well, we had up-to-date maps, which showed trails and rivers and topography. So we would right away figure out at least 2 different ways to get out of the situation if we needed to in a hurry. And we would keep those open to us. We also didn't want the fire to spread, and get around behind us. That's why digging a line is the utmost importance. You fall in your trees, you fall it into the growth that's already burning, so that nothing gets out on the other side of the line.
What about what about if you was there? I think one time you told me about this called shake and bake bag.
Oh,
That
the
hopefully you never
fire
had to try
shelters.
to use, right? What was that?
So it's a bag. I don't know Chris, what was that movie we watched where all those firefighters died?
Only the Brave. I was actually going to ask you about that crew, but that was
Only the Brave.
called
Yep.
Only the
Yep.
Brave,
So
and
we
that
had
was
them.
about the
We
Granite
trained how
Mountain
to
hot
use them.
shots.
That's it. Yep. So basically it's looks like a sleeping bag sized thing. It's got reflective foil on the inside. It's got fireproof canvas on the outside, and it's got holders in the corner, all four corners. So you pull it out of your pouch on the side, you shake it out, you stand in the back two corners, and then you lift up and grab the front two corners. And in one fell swoop, you just fall down and tuck your arms in. That traps air inside of that. You only use that just as the fire's about to hit you. And theoretically, the fire burns over you, and you get up and you run back into the burnt part where it's starting to cool down, and you will survive.
Have you ever known anyone who's used them and had to use them?
Not in actual use, no, but we trained for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that was, so we're just about 15 minutes, and that's a good spot where we're at now. I wanted to ask you about the Granite. I wanted to get your view on the Granite Mountain hot shots, and maybe talk a little bit about fire weather and how that played a part in what happened to them.
And
Well-
I'm sorry, Doc C. CR, could you just summarize that the hot shots and what did occur? I mean, it's very tragic, but could you just
Sure.
give us a summary?
Yep. So the Granite Mountain hot shots were in Yarnell, Colorado, I believe. And they were distinctive because they were the only municipally owned hot shot crew. And basically what they would do is if a call went out, they would get in their truck and they would drive out, and they were a hand crew. And what happened, I don't remember if it was the Yarnell fire itself or if it was the fire after the Yarnell fire, but they were tasked to go up the side of a draw and protect this draw. And they had looked at their maps and they had say, okay, well, if we're going to get overrun, our plan is to go down the draw to this horse ranch, and we will hold out there. And I think it was midday. They tasked their recruit, their new guy on the crew, Donut, to do fire weather. So they dropped him off, or actually a guy in a gator came and picked him up and took him up to the top of the draw so he could do fire weather. And he was within radio communications of the rest of his crew. And the rest of his crew went down to the line. Well, what happened is the fire jumped. The weather turned, the fire jumped, and they couldn't get out on their main route. So they decided to go down the draw to their escape. But they unfortunately didn't make it to their escape route because the weather was moving faster than what they had planned. And they had to use they had to use their shelters, and unfortunately Donut was the only one. Well, his name was McDonald, but they called him Donut. Donut was the only one that survived out of his crew. And that was just that's the hard part of it, because he regrets that today. He doesn't know why his boss picked him to be the weather guy. But I just wanted to get your insight on that as a firefighter and as having seen the movie. What were your thoughts on that incident?
Well, that was kind of nebulous. They had lots of, fire, it just doesn't advance in a nice straight line. It goes, left, right, up, over. These big chunks of fire that you see in the picture there, they can actually carry some smoldering debris with it and then drop down and start another fire anywhere. The wind typically goes uphill because warm air rises, which brings more cool air in behind it. So it makes its own little fan, if you will, that fans those flames. And you really don't want to be above the fire because that's where it's going. But at any time, it could decide to jump over a little bit, maybe over a ridge, get in a draw. You don't even see it, and all of a sudden it races around and it bites you in the butt.
Well, and I think one of the things I heard that happened is if it had kept moving at the way it was moving, it would have moved over them. They would have been able to get out of their shelters into the black. But what I heard is as soon as it went over them, it stalled out. And
yeah,
the weather
if the wind
actually
stops
sat
blowing,
on top of them.
Yeah, it turns into an oven real quick.
So I really didn't, follow up on it. So I don't know if I think out of respect of those guys, they dissolved Granite Mountain. They didn't recrew it. There's a picture of the crew, and I should have totally got it on here, but there was a fire in Yarnell. They were based out of Yarnell, and I think it's a yucca tree that's hundreds of years old that they were actually tasked to save, and they saved the tree.
I remember that. Yeah.
So there's a big picture of them in a huge pyramid in front of the tree. And that was, I believe, the last time they were together on a fire successfully.
Yeah. Now there's another group that deserves a shout out, and that is the hotshots who jump out of a perfectly good airplane and parachute into a fire.
Right. The smoke jumpers, which that's actually got an interesting backstory to it. A lot of my listeners might know that I did World War II paratrooper reenacting for a while. So I was kind of interested to find the history on this. That was actually started smoke jumping with your firefighting gear into a fire was started with the paratroopers. And the group that mainly did it was the Triple Nickel division. And these gentlemen were hard charging ass kickers. They were, and here's the thing, they were an all colored unit at that time in the military. Yeah, you could be on the front lines, you could be a paratrooper, but everybody understands at that time the different things that were going on. Our country was still segregated. We did not let the African-American paratroopers into combat, but internally they stayed home and they formed the U.S. Forest Service's first detachment of smoke jumpers. And these guys are amazing. They're jumping in with close to 95 pounds of gear.
Yeah.
I mean, they're wearing, they don't just jump in like combat. They've got protective gear on. They've got padded suits. They've got helmets. That in and of itself weighs about 85 pounds. All their gear is dropped in on a parachute. So once they land, they've got to find their equipment. And in that equipment is the same stuff that you used on Helitack and a ground crew,
Yeah.
Your Pulaskis, your shovels, saws and everything. And they do the same thing. But the nice thing about the smoke jumpers is they can get in quick. But there have been a number of injuries with that too, because you're jumping out of an airplane into fire. And it's a bad mixture. But so we're coming up on time here. So what was your favorite memory of being a firefighter for the Forest Service?
In the evening, when we had that big fire and we're all sitting in a meadow and we're, bringing the trucks all around in a circle, and we got a big fire going in the middle, and all of the guys start flying in with their helicopters at the end of the evening, and they'd make these big swoop down, turn around, and then down again, and then boop on the ground. And then they came out and they were all hooping and hollering and just having a great time. And oh man, those guys could fly.
Well, I wanted to thank you. We'll end it a bit short. We got about 5 minutes left, but we'll end it a bit short tonight. We're actually going to have you on again next week. Like I was telling the folks when we started, this is actually going to be a 3-show series about the U.S. Forest Service. So next week, we're going to have you on again. And we're going to be talking about not doing the firefighting, but you're also a park ranger. So we're going to talk about that aspect of it. So I wanted to thank you for coming on, Doc C, and have a good week, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. So that was Doc Z. Always great getting to listen to him and his stories. And, like I said, I've been captive in this family since 1984, but I absolutely love every time I get to talk to him. So it's like every time I talk to him, it's like hearing the story for the first time. So
yeah, it's very interesting.
Just about a couple minutes left. I wanted to go ahead and update our listeners and our viewers with what we have coming down the pipe for this series and maybe the next couple of shows. So next week is going to be episode 2 of this, and it's going to be about Dan's time as a park ranger at the Custer Guard Station in Idaho. And that was probably about a year to 2 years worth of service, taking care of a guard station and going to campgrounds and taking care of campgrounds and all that. So that is.
He was also at Bonanza Guard Station, where there was was a ghost, like in the middle of a ghost town, and there was this huge dredge there as well. It was up the Yankee Fork River.
Yeah, the Yankee Fork.
Lots of adventures, mountain goats, a lot of miners, gold miners there. If you got on their property at the wrong time, you could be shot at, and especially if you had a Forest Service uniform on. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one.
Yep. So that's July 28th. And then coming up on August 4th, Friday, August 4th, we're going to be talking about something that I'm a little bit of a treasure hunter. So I like to, I like to look at things and figure out things that I'd like to do. And this one is on D.B. Cooper. It was a gentleman in the 70s that hijacked a plane in the Pacific Northwest, requested a certain amount of money and 2 parachutes, and he jumped out of this plane and was never seen again. They found some of his cash in the mid-'80s, but they have never found him. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next 2 weeks. I wanted to thank you folks for coming on and listening and being great patrons of our radio broadcast. And to that, we will see you next week as we go into the breach again for another episode on the U.S. Forest Service. Thank you, folks, and have a great night.